it's saddening that our government has not said anything in regards to the situation that Boniface went through. We had expected that because he's a citizen of this great land of ours, the government would speak. Initially, when he was missing, we expected the government to speak and say that he needs to be released wherever he was being held. After his statement yesterday, no one has spoken. And it's disappointing that he's being treated like a non-citizen. No one seems to care. And so we are calling for the government to also take responsibility over its citizens. The government needs to speak. The government needs to protect its citizens, and their voice needs to be heard. I don't think there's any other way of saying it other than we are disappointed by that silence. I don't know whether they were denied medical treatment and access to their families or legal representatives. Rather than being brought to a court of law, they were kept in inhumane detention conditions. In their June 2 press conference, that was yesterday, they named the arresting officers and described the stations involved. Tanzania bears a duty under the United Nations Convention Against Torture to protect all people against torture. Torture and cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment are serious crimes under multiple treaties and international law. The government of Tanzania must arrest and prosecute all officers suspected of responsibility for the human rights violations against Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuhaire and bring them to justice in a fair trial. Brenda, your question, yeah, sorry? Jacinta, yes, Jacinta. Your question is deep. Okay, yeah, that's a deep question because when we talk of the experiences, just if you recall what they said yesterday, the pain, the anxious moments, not knowing what was to come next, it's deeply troubling that to begin with, they were abducted or arrested on the basis of a crime that was not specified. And so when you're there going to observe a trial case and there's no offense you have committed, it means that we are all at risk. When you travel to any of the East African countries, it means that we are all at risk of being arrested, detained, dehumanized, and tortured. And so the fact that the East African countries are going into elections this year, next year, and the year after, if that is going to be the order of things, it's really, it's a very sad affair. And I just want to really emphasize that there's no room for torture. There's absolutely no room for torture. The UN Convention Against Torture is very, very clear. And as my colleagues here have said, we want to pursue all options that are available to us, including the Special Rapporteur on Torture, including the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and all other available mechanisms and spaces. Now, the issue of dissenting voice, it's a shame that our leaders do not allow the expression of voice, that people can choose a leader, that people can choose a direction. And so when you arrest, abduct, torture people, and this is just in general, but this particular two, Agatha and Boniface, they actually had not even said anything, and they were very clear. So there's really no reason for why they went through what they went through. And as Madam President says, the more you push people, the more people push back. You cannot just be abducting and torturing people. So our message today, both as a Police Reforms Working Group and the Law Society of Kenya, as the President has said, is that we are calling for an immediate end to the impunity we are seeing the leaders in East Africa enjoying. It is very saddening, but one of these days it's going to come to an end. So we need to just alert the leadership that, we are watching and it needs to come to an end.
There was a question was asked by Brenda, which relates to the feasibility of these issues being brought to the parliaments of Uganda and Kenya. Regardless of I guess, the political environment, particularly as we lean into elections, first of all for Uganda and secondly for Kenya, it is important to recognize that all national assemblies bear a oath, a duty of obligation to citizens and to provide oversight for the effect, the work or the operations of the executive and the National Police Service. This obligation does not disappear. All modern states have parliamentary procedures for essentially holding the executive accountable. In this particular case, we think that a private member's bill, private member's question, or the action of a committee would be sufficient to have the ministries of foreign affairs in the two countries come and outline. And we are not at this point, prejudicially arguing that they have done anything wrong. What we're saying is that they have an obligation to report to the national assemblies on what they did to keep Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuhaire safe. And secondly, what actions would they spell out that they will take as a result following the really horrendous testimonies that we heard yesterday. Those testimonies were heartbreaking. There is nobody, I think, who has listened to them who does not have a sense of a point that we have reached within Tanzania that has to be brought to a court of law. The two of them were arrested, we know, by police officers. They were detained and tortured in the presence of their lawyers, and then they simply disappeared for 4 days. The explanation and the report that they gave yesterday really is not something that should be happening in any modern state today. And definitely it should not be happening in a community that essentially has within its constitutive act the words human rights, democracy, and governance. So we think that these institutions, these parliaments, must investigate further the circumstances under which East African citizens were tortured, they were enforcibly disappeared, and then transported against their wishes incommunicado for several thousands of kilometers until the borders of their home countries. Allow me to stop there and invite any other questions. Through a brutal campaign against dissent, the Tanzanian authorities have created a chilling climate of fear, silencing anyone who criticizes President Samia Suluhu Hassan ahead of the October 2025 elections. Unless urgently addressed, this and the brutal treatment of Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuhaire shall remain a stark indictment of violent repression and impunity under President Samia Suluhu Hassan's government, and the East African community's silence shall render it complicit. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon, and apologies for the delay in starting. We hope you're able to keep this that they gave yesterday will be really useless unless we see justice come from this. So we urge you as members of the press to ensure that this story continues for the rest of this week. Thank you very much. Copies of the statement